our first pathogen for pathogen group number 5. So let me put this up here, PG5. This is Candida albicans. It's a yeast, and it's if you were it is eukaryotic, of course, but if you were to gram stain it, it would show up as gram positive, known motile. No motility. It's a dimorphic fungus. That means it has this fungus-like growth with the filamentous kind of growth, the pseudohyphae, and it also has the yeast-like growth with the yeast cells. It forms chlamydospores. It's part of your normal microbiota. I should change this from flora to the more modern term is microbiota. So let me change the color of my pen. So that's better. So the old term was flora. Nowadays, most people use microbiota as the term. It's an opportunistic pathogen. That means it is, while it's part of your normal microbiota, if you are taking a round of antibiotics, you might kill off the bacteria that were also populating your microbiota, and then the yeast takes over, and that would make it an opportunistic pathogen. About 20% of women carry some candida in their vagina. It's usually higher in pregnancy. The type of disease names that you would find would be candidiasis, thrush, or yeast infection. That's what people would call it. The majority of women will have a vaginal yeast infection at some time in their life, and it's characterized by a thick white discharge, itching, burning, and dyspareunia. That means painful sexual intercourse. Here is what this can look like. This would have to hurt. Take a look at this thrush here in the mouth. This white yeast cell, yeast growth. You can see yeasty growth. And this baby, I'm not sure who would let their baby get to this stage, but these diapers probably weren't changed for a long time. And this baby ends up with neonatal candidiasis. So here, thrush, more thrush in the mouth. You can see this whitish kind of stuff in the mouth. Here, more diaper rash. I mean, this is really bad. You can see how inflamed everything is. This baby is, I'm sure, not happy. Here would be Candida albicans shown in the sputum of a person that's infected. You can see the filamentous kind of growth right here, and then sort of the yeast-like growth right here, this more yeast-like growth. So that would be from somebody's sputum, and then you have the dimorphic fungus here, the yeast-like growth, the filamentous growth, and then the yeast-like growth. Here you have the chlamydospores from a Candida albicans. You can take a look at that. And then here, the germ tubes. It's not a very good picture, I have to admit that. Moving on, our next pathogen is ringworm fungi. That's a pretty big group of fungal infections here. It's any fungus attacking the skin, scalp, or nails. Tinea equal means it's a ringworm fungus. And then depending on where what body part it infects. If it's the body, then it will be tinea corporis right here. If it infects the foot right here, that would be tinea pedis. If it's on your head, it would be tinea capitis. If it's tinea unguium, that means the nails are affected. The genera that are in question here will be Trichophyton, Microsporum, Dermatophyton, and others. And here you have multicellular arthrospores that you can see right there. So here will be tinea corporis. This will be ringworm on the body, and you can see these ring-like structures. It does look like a ring, but it has nothing to do with a worm. It's a fungus. So right here, but tinea corporis right here, ringworm on the body. Then here would be more ringworm here on this person's neck. You can see the ring structures, kind of like there, right here, ring. And then here, tinea capitis. This is pretty bad. This would be on the head. And then here, tinea unguium, that will be on the nails. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure who would let their nails get to this point where they look like this, but I don't know. Some people, maybe they don't take care of themselves too well. Here will be tinea pedis. This would be ringworm on the foot. On the left side, not too bad. This is something you could take care of with a antifungal ointment. Over here, now this is pretty bad. I'm not sure who would let their foot get to this point, but oh well, somebody did. Next pathogen is Cryptococcus neoformans. This one is the cause of cryptococcosis. It's typically affecting the lungs, but it can also go systemic, meaning body-wide, and it can lead to a meningitis. It's a yeast-like fungus with a capsule. You can tell how that has this capsule surrounding the body of this yeast-like cells. The reservoir is pigeon or other bird feces. So basically the way it happens is that the pigeon drops fecal material on the ground, and that mixes in with the dust, and then it becomes airborne. Maybe a car coming by and the dust is going into the air and becomes airborne, and then somebody would inhale that. Typically it doesn't really cause big problems in most patients, but if you're already immunocompromised, such as a HIV patient, or have for some other reason poor body defenses, so your immune system is down, then it can cause a big problem. And here would be the Cryptococcus neoformans life cycle or cycle of infection. Here the pigeons dropping their feces on the ground, mixes in with the dirt right here. And then here the dust goes up into the air and gets inhaled by this person, goes into the lungs, and there is the Cryptococcus neoformans causing cryptococcosis. Here is a bad case. This is a fatal case, in fact, of disseminated cryptococcosis. There you can see how this pathogen has this slimy capsule right there, and you can see literally this capsule material on this person. I'm sure heavily immunocompromised, this person, otherwise it wouldn't get to this point. Next pathogen, Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Now this is a bacterium right here, and it's in this group because it's a fungus-like bacterium. So it is a bacterium with fungus-like or filamentous type of growth. It is a very important pathogen that has affected millions of people worldwide, and still it's considered that about 1/3 of the world's population will eventually be infected or is infected with this bacterium. It has it's still about 3.5 million annual deaths, which is a lot. It's an acid-fast gram-positive bacillus, so the gram stain would come back positive. It is acid-fast, and you learned that in the lab. Luckily, we were still in session at MtSAC when you got to do the acid-fast stain, which is not an easy stain, but once you get it down, if something retains the dye, even if you're washing with acid alcohol, then that means there's mycolic acid in the cell wall, and that will be a mycobacterium. So the pathogen has no motility, it's a non-spore forming, can infect any part of the body, but it's typically the lungs that are being infected and leading them to tuberculosis. It's a chronic disease. It develops slowly, but it's really hard to get rid of it. In the US, there's been a pretty drastic decline of tuberculosis infections. So you can see some of the statistics right here and the epidemiology data. However, there is fear that a super resistant super mycobacterium could very well start infecting much of the world's population again, and then we wouldn't even have an antibiotic to treat that resistant tuberculosis. So here's some more demographics. Cases per 100,000 of the population in 2015. It's not too bad in the United States. But the big concern is resistant mycobacterium that could then be a potentially very large problem. Here, some more kind of numbers here on tuberculosis cases worldwide. You can take a look at that. There's something called TB skin testing, and with the skin test, what you would test for is whether somebody has the antibody. So you're injecting tuberculin, that means that is the antigen, and if somebody has the had the disease or was potentially vaccinated, and they would have the antibodies. Now, if you're injecting the antigen and somebody has the antibodies, then there will be an antigen-antibody interaction, and it will cause this sort of inflammatory kind of response. So this here would be a positive test where you can see that somebody, the antibodies interacted with the antigen that was injected under the skin. And that will be a positive test. Now, you test positive if you were vaccinated or you've had a disease or you currently have it. And that a positive test usually requires further sort of investigation of what's going on. And here, next pathogen is Mycobacterium leprae. That's the cause of leprosy. And here it's also a mycobacterium, so therefore acid-fast, gram-positive bacillus, no motility, non-spore forming, very difficult transmission. So this is sort of your disease of biblical proportions. It has a very long incubation period. It's very difficult for transmission. At biblical times, the treatment was basically if somebody had leprosy, they were sent out to sort of an isolated area so that they would be away and just live with other lepers. But if you're having somebody in a house that has leprosy, you would have to basically be in close contact with them, share, bed sheets and towels and that kind of stuff before the transmission would take place. You can't really grow this pathogen in media, but you can culture it on armadillos for whatever reason. It causes pigment changes to the skin and causes you to lose your sense of touch, and so you won't have any feeling or anesthesia in some affected body parts. Causes also trophic changes. That means you grow extra bumps or you are losing body parts. So there would be atrophy, would be losing body parts like a finger portion comes off, or hypertrophy would mean that you are getting extra body parts or extra little bumps, extra growth. So here will be the trophic changes. You can see extra growth right here on this person's ears, and then atrophy. So this would be hypertrophy, and then here over here atrophy, where the fingers keep getting shorter because parts of it fall off. And then here would be this discoloration basically that you see. So over here the pigmentation changes that you can see, and then down here you can see that large portion of the toes have already come off, or here the deformed foot right here. More pictures here, the decoloration very clearly seen on this person's back, and then the hypertrophy, the extra bumps that are growing right there. And here over the span of 2 years of development, starting out fairly mild, it's not too much that you can see on the hypertrophy and the atrophy, and then here 2 years later the same person pretty disfigured from the leprosy. Nowadays you can treat the disease with antibiotics, and you can see very successful treatment. This boy had leprosy and looks good now. Here's some leprosy cases in select countries, 2010 through 2015. Overall, not too many cases. Some countries that stand out would be India. There's a lot of cases here in this 5-year time span. Or Brazil seems to also have a significant number of cases. And our last slide here, this would be leprosy cases in the United States. Leprosy, by the way, also known as Hansen's disease. And you can see in the United States, there aren't many cases at all. And the this spike of cases that you see right here, there was an influx of refugees from areas of the world where the disease is more common. So fill out your pathogen sheets on this pathogen group, and make sure that you're organized, that you are filling out the appropriate sheets here. Of course, we didn't have any viruses this time, so all non-viral pathogen sheets, please fill those out. And you can find plenty more information on these pathogens also on the internet.